entire western United States is in the grips of a drought. Here in California, it's one of the worst we've ever experienced. They've even made breaking the water regulations on watering your landscapes a misdemeanor this year, with up to a $600 fine. So Big Brother is watching your water meter. So when I talk to people in the Bay Area about waterless landscapes, I think most of them look at me like, yeah, you think you can walk on water? Well, how about you raise the dead? What do you mean waterless landscape? There are a few elite gardeners here in California who are well aware of the fact that we can use native plants, succulents, Mediterranean exotic plants in landscapes here without using really hardly a drop of water to maintain them. But the average gardener not only doesn't understand this, most Californians are really kind of addicted to the water systems we have here. They put a plant in, they immediately begin pouring water on it. That's just the program. When I sold plants in the nursery, the first question out of people's mouths was usually, well, how much water does it need? I think the more appropriate question is, how little water will it survive on? But we're always trying to figure out how much water we should put on our plants. Well, I'm here to tell you today, in the midst of a drought, it is entirely possible to grow a beautiful landscape without having to put a drop of water on it at all. Whatever rainfall comes here in California will support most of the native plants and a lot of the exotics that we bring in, as long as we choose the right ones and as long as the way we lay them out in the landscape is appropriate to that. To begin with, one of the things about landscaping in the West that I disagree with, and it's this idea of what I call a shrub in a shrub. If you go around, you look in the commercial landscapes, you look in people's yards, what you'll find is that they have taken a shrub, they've put it in. Then there's a space of a foot to 3 feet or more between that and the next piece of plant that's then put in, and then another piece of plant is put in. Then the entire area beneath is usually covered with some kind of a mulch. It used to be fir bark or redwood bark, which was kind of beneficial to the soil. These days it's mostly ground wood scrap with dye on it, which isn't so cool. Anyway, it's mulched, and then the guys come through, they take the hedge trimmers and they cut everything into little balls or little cubes or little squares or some funny shape, and as if the normal or natural shape of the plant is offensive to our eye and we have to sculpt it into something else. This in itself, I think, is the psychological issue that we have to deal with. But after that, then they come through with the leaf blowers. 6:30 every morning. Here comes the leaf blower. Across every landscape in town, sweeping away every tiny bit of organic matter from the landscape. I'm not a particularly religious man, but if I was Satan and I was ejected from the Garden of Eden for having caused the fall of mankind, when I was forced to crawl out of the garden on my belly as a serpent and disappear into the world, and I lost my place in such a wonderful Eden, I would want revenge. In the case of Satan, I'm an eternal being and I have to wait for a long, long time. I have all the patience in the world, and if I have to wait from the beginning of time in Eden for the 20th century to come along before man could invent the two-stroke internal combustion engine, and the chainsaw and the leaf blower and the weed whacker could be created, so at 6:30 every morning an army of guys named Juan can come out into the landscape and go, wake everybody in the landscape up, turn all your shrubbery into tiny little balls, cut down your trees, and run away laughing hysterically with all of your organic matter balled up into a tarp and dragged away to the dump someplace rather than being put back down in the soil like it belongs. I say that the leaf blower is the work of Satan. Anybody out there who disagrees with me is more than welcome to come on in and comment on my pages. We'll discuss this issue, but I'm positive. Anyway, here behind me, I have a landscape that does not use water. It's my front yard. My yard has had its better days and its worse days. There were times when I worked diligently on this project. There are other times, like right now, that I just kind of let it go and do its thing. But This landscape does not receive a drop of water. It was installed, most of it, around 16 years ago. There have been some things added and subtracted in that time, but mostly what we see out here is Darwinism. There are plants that are adapted to the habitat that they're in, and plants that will tolerate the normal growing conditions here in California without additional water. Right over here we have a form of a jade plant. It's a succulent that has the rolled foliage. A lot of you probably have jade plants in your landscapes or in your house for house plants, and they have the flat leaf. This one's got a tube. I call it the jade plant from Jupiter because it looks alien. Down below I have Cuban oregano. It likes shade and a little protection from frost. It smells like oregano. It has a nice spicy smell. It's surrounded by creeping fuchsia. It's also surrounded by creeping thyme. And back there we have a pregnant onion, or Ornithogallum, growing right out of a rock, and that receives no water. It does fine back there. It's in a little shade, so that helps. Right here is a South African native. It's a euphorbia that we call the corncob plant. It's cool. I like this thing. It's really just an alien Martian sort of a look. Right above the corncob plant is a leucospermum. Leucospermum is just a wonderful drought-tolerant shrub. Red stems, silvery foliage, and those wonderful ivory and orange blossoms on top make good cut flowers. From this angle you can see a mass of varieties of lavender in collection. There's about 5 varieties of lavender all grouped together out here. At the moment, none of them are really in flower. They will come soon, and when that happens we're going to have blue and indigo all over the front yard. It's backdropped by Calamagrostis overdam, a variegated canary grass, and then up and behind it over there is a dwarf bottlebrush called Little John. That baby is tough. Next to it there's an evergreen serviceberry called Amelanchier dentistictus from Chiapas. The serviceberry has really cool kind of pearl pink berries on it. The birds love it. It's good stuff. We've understoried everything here. I have the creeping fuchsia back there with the Peruvian lily, Alstroemeria, here in the foreground. We're working with an aeonium from the Canary Islands. Adjacent to the Alstroemeria, we have a creeping fuchsia called Fuchsia procumbens from New Zealand. Really strange little yellow, orange, and black flowers. Non-typical sort of a fuchsia. Right next to it over here, we have the southern sword fern popping up as we reach into the shady areas. In the sunlight coming up above, there's some San Pedro cactus, and then next to it we've got a Butylon megapotanicum. This plant is not well known for being drought tolerant, but it's growing out of the side of an old palm stump that I have here. See the residue of my old Washingtonia palm stump there. Stuck into it, we have some Burrows tails. There's a we have the ponytail palm from Baja. And the Butylon does well over here because the palm stump is a big sponge. It's a biosink. It holds water from the winter time and then re-releases it slowly like a sponge to the plants around it during the summer. A little bit of a trick there that makes this all happen, but again, no irrigation required for this landscape. Over here you got succulents in strawberry jars. It's kind of cool. You know, we got the condominium style succulent garden. San Pedro cactus with creeping rosemary in jars. Over here we've got a Delosperma pink flowering ice plant. Right next to it there's more of the corncob plants. We've got the pork and bean sedums. There's a very large euphorbia in the back there, jumbo corncobs. Up behind here you'll see a very large older ponytail palm, which is underneath the Hawaiian koa tree, which seems to take the drought pretty well. There we have a joy of various different colors of aeoniums from the Canary Islands. The aeoniums are backdropped by a California native salvia called hummingbird sage, or Salvia spathiacea. Got some soap lilies over here, and then we got the calla lilies. Going up the way by my orange tree, we've got succulents and alstroemerias, pork and beans here, all growing underneath the bottle brush with its bright red flowers. And we get some mimulus out here on the end, right by the end of the sidewalk. All of this is growing underneath a rather large old navel orange. The navel orange does require some water. I have to put a hose under there. But everything else growing around it is drought tolerant completely and requires no irrigation at all. Here's one of my favorite shrubs. This is a manzanita Howard McMinn. It's one of the tall growing manzanitas. It's got an awesome red bark underneath. I just love manzanitas. California poppies, both orange and red, out here along the sidewalk. So take note, there's a mesobryanthemum here in the foreground with creeping thyme up along the edge of it, growing into lavender, which is growing into California coyote mint, Monardella villosa, with taller growing lavenders up behind. Grasses to the rear and then rising up again, bottle brush. So the keys to waterless landscapes in California and the West are selecting the right plants, planting the plants in a more naturalized type of setting so that they have opportunity to associate with one another rather than having huge areas of open ground between where evaporation can happen. Making sure that you're leaving the organic matter in the landscape so that the mycorrhizal fungi can attach to the plants, because the fungi is part of the key in a natural waterless landscape. Waterless landscape can be done, and a waterless landscape can be beautiful. There's no reason we should be wasting our water on lawns and shrubs in the front yard when we could be growing these wonderful drought-tolerant plants instead. I think actually they're far more interesting. Most of these are attractive to hummingbirds, insects, and other creatures. Lawns with shrubs tend to be very, very sterile and don't attract the more beneficial type birds and so on. Anyway, it's possible. It's right here behind me. Proof's in the pudding. I guarantee, haven't put a drop of water on this stuff in easily over 15 years, with the exception of the orange tree there. So you can do it too. Do your part. Save some water. Let's use it for cooking and taking showers in the West. Let's not waste it on our landscapes. If you're gonna put water out there, put it on some food. Across the street we got my neighbor Rose. Now Rose is watering her front yard, but it's a good thing because Rose's front yard is filled with food. What you got out there, Rose? You got fava beans, pomegranates, all kind of food, right?
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. So she took out the whole lawn, and instead of putting in a drought-tolerant garden like I have here, she put food in the front yard. I got food in the back, drought-tolerant in the front, whatever. It all works out. If you're gonna water in the West, let's do something worthwhile with the water. Hey, thanks for being a great gardener, Rose.